Hello, and a huge welcome to the channel. If you're looking for cross-dressing stories that are emotional, intriguing, and truly empowering, you've come to the right place. Doctor, I think there's something wrong. I've started to feel a soreness in my chest when I touch it. That's what I would say, weeks later. But on that first day, sitting on the crinkly paper of the examination table, I said nothing of the sort. I was just tired. That was the word I used. A deep soul-level exhaustion that felt less like a lack of sleep and more like a slow dimming of my own internal light. My name is Lionel. I was 28 years old, an engineer for a civil design firm, and my life was a series of straight lines and predictable angles. I designed roadways, calculated load-bearing capacities, and lived in a beige apartment with beige furniture. I wasn't unhappy, not in the way people cry or scream. I was simply vacant, an unoccupied space waiting for a tenant who had lost the address. Dr. Martinez was a kind man with tired eyes and a gentle smile. He listened patiently as I described the fog in my head, the lack of motivation that made getting out of bed feel like a monumental act of will. It's like I'm running on low battery, and the charger is broken. I explained, fumbling for an analogy he might understand. He nodded, jotted down some notes, and sent me for a blood test. A week later, I was back in his office, perched on the edge of the same chair. "Well, Lionel, the results are in," he said, sliding his glasses up his nose. "Your testosterone levels are on the low end of the normal range. It's not uncommon, but it could certainly explain the fatigue and general malaise you've been feeling." He scribbled on a prescription pad with a flourish. "I'm going to start you on a low-dose HRT to help balance your hormones. It should help with your energy levels and mood." HRT, hormone replacement therapy. It sounded serious, clinical, but I trusted him. He was the expert. After all, I took the little slip of paper, thanked him, and went to the pharmacy. The pharmacist handed me a small white bottle with a child-proof cap. I glanced at the label. It read estradiol, 2 milligrams. Take 1 tablet daily. Estradiol. The name pricked at my memory from some high school biology class. Wasn't that a female hormone, estrogen? A flutter of confusion went through me. I almost turned back to the counter to ask, but a line had formed behind me. People were waiting, sighing impatiently. The thought of holding them up, of asking a stupid question and revealing my ignorance, was enough to make my cheeks burn. It was probably just a brand name, or some compound that sounded like something else. Dr. Martinez knew what he was doing. It was fine. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, the little bottle in my hand. I shook one of the pills out into my palm. It was tiny, round, and a pale, delicate shade of pink. It looked harmless, almost like a piece of candy. I pulled out my phone and typed estradiol into the search bar. The results confirmed my initial suspicion. Estradiol is a form of estrogen, a female sex hormone used to treat symptoms of menopause, also used in hormone therapy for transgender women. My heart gave a sharp, uncomfortable thump. Transgender women. Menopause. This couldn't be right. Dr. Martinez must have made a mistake. The pharmacy must have made a mistake. This was a woman's medicine. I stared at the pink pill. A wave of anxiety washed over me. I should call the doctor's office first thing in the morning. I should go back to the pharmacy and demand an explanation. It was the logical, rational thing to do. The engineering part of my brain laid out the steps, the flowchart of corrective actions. But another part of me, a quieter, more curious part, whispered something else. What if it's not a mistake? It was a ridiculous thought. Of course it was a mistake. But what if he prescribed it for a reason? Some off-label use to balance things out. He said HRT. Maybe this is part of it. I thought about my life, the endless grey routine, the feeling of being a ghost in my own skin. Nothing ever changed. I felt a strange, reckless impulse. What was the worst that could happen from one tiny pill? It wasn't like I would wake up a different person. It was just a chemical, a molecule. I looked at the pink dot in my palm one last time. If it's really wrong, I murmured to the empty room. The doctor would have known. It was a flimsy excuse, a paper-thin justification. But it was enough. I tossed the pill into my mouth, took a swallow of water from the glass on my nightstand, and felt it slide down my throat. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a strange sense of calm settled over me. Not a solution, but a surrender. I had made a choice, however small and misguided, and now all I could do was wait. I switched off the light and lay back in the darkness, my hand resting on my chest, feeling the steady, unchanged rhythm of my heart. The first week was unremarkable. I took the pill every night before bed, a secret ritual performed in the quiet of my apartment. I half expected to wake up with a higher voice or softer hands, but nothing so dramatic occurred. Life went on. I went to work. I designed intersections. I ate takeout alone. But slowly, subtly, things began to shift. The first thing I noticed was my sleep. I had always been a restless sleeper, my mind churning with calculations and anxieties. Now, I was sinking into a deep, dreamless slumber that left me feeling genuinely rested in the morning. The fog in my head began to thin. Then came the emotional changes. They were small at first. I was listening to a classical station on the radio during my commute, and a particularly beautiful cello piece came on. A lump formed in my throat, and my eyes welled with tears. I had to pull over to the side of the road, overwhelmed by a wave of pure, unadulterated melancholy and beauty. I hadn't cried in years. It felt cleansing. At work, I found myself laughing more easily at my colleagues' jokes. Sarah, the project manager from the next cubicle over, told a silly story about her cat, and I let out a real honest-to-God giggle. She blinked in surprise, then smiled. "It's good to hear you laugh, Lionel." My senses felt sharper. Too, the world seemed to be in higher definition. The scent of rain on hot asphalt was intoxicating. The taste of my morning coffee was richer, more complex. I started noticing things I had previously ignored: the intricate pattern of a leaf, the way the sunlight filtered through the office blinds, the array of colors in the fabric store I passed every day. One afternoon, I saw my colleague, Jessica, walking across the office. She was wearing a simple knee-length dress made of a deep red, satin-like material. It shimmered under the fluorescent lights as she moved, draping over her body in a way that seemed both elegant and effortless. I had seen women in dresses my whole life. Of course, I'd never given them a second thought. But this time was different. My eyes followed the flow of the fabric, the way it swirled around her legs as she turned a corner. A strange feeling stirred in my chest. It wasn't desire, not in the way a man typically desires a woman. It was something else. A strange resonance. An echo. It was appreciation. And something more. A quiet, inexplicable yearning. As if some part of me, deep inside, recognized the soft rustle of the satin and sighed in response. That night, as I swallowed the little pink pill, I didn't feel anxious anymore. I just felt curious. The vacant space inside me was still there, but now, a faint, colorful light was beginning to flicker in the window. My body was no longer my own. 3 weeks turned into 4, and then 6. The subtle shifts began to compound, becoming less like quirks and more like fundamental changes to my operating system. The little pink pill was no longer a reckless experiment. It was a non-negotiable part of my nightly routine. The anxiety of the first night had been completely replaced by a quiet, expectant hum. The most undeniable change was my skin. I'd always had the typical rough, calloused hands of a man who didn't bother with lotion. Now, they were becoming soft. The skin on my arms and face felt smoother, less porous. One morning, while shaving, I paused and just ran my fingertips over my cheek. The texture was different, finer. The face staring back at me was still mine. Same brown eyes, same straight nose, but the lines around my eyes seemed gentler, the jawline a fraction less severe. It was like someone had taken the photograph of my face and subtly adjusted the contrast, turning down the harshness. My body odor changed, too. The sharp, musky scent that clung to my gym clothes was fading, replaced by something lighter, sweeter, and almost unnoticeable. I found I didn't need to use as much deodorant. It was an intimate change, one only I could perceive, but it felt profound. Then came the soreness. It started as a dull ache in my chest, right behind the nipples, the kind of tenderness you might get from bumping into a table corner. I dismissed it at first, but it didn't go away. It intensified, especially in the shower when the hot water streamed over my torso. The area felt sensitive, alive with a network of new nerves. Small, firm buds were forming beneath the skin. My logical mind knew exactly what was happening. The estradiol was stimulating breast tissue development, but the emotional reality of it was staggering. My body was building something new, something that had never been there before. It was terrifying and, in a way that I was ashamed to admit, exhilarating. One Saturday morning, I stepped out of the shower and caught my reflection in the steam-fogged mirror. I wiped a clear patch with my hand and stared. The water droplets clung to my skin, which looked smooth and almost translucent in the morning light. My collarbones seemed more prominent, framing the elegant curve of my neck. My hips, though still narrow, had the barest hint of a new roundness at the sides. And my eyes looked huge, darker, and held a new expression of bewildered vulnerability. "Who am I looking at?" I whispered, my breath fogging the glass again. It was my face, but it wasn't. It was Lionel's face, but inhabited by a different spirit. The emptiness I had lived with for so long was being filled, not with happiness, necessarily, but with feeling. A tidal wave of it. I started a journal, a cheap spiral notebook I bought at the drugstore. I had to write it all down, if only to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy. October 14th. I wrote, cried during a car insurance commercial today. It was about a father teaching his daughter to drive. I don't know why it affected me so much. I just felt this overwhelming wave of emotion. It's happening more and more. Everything feels so intense. October 22nd. My chest really hurts. It's a constant, low-level ache. I bumped into my desk at work and almost gasped out loud. It's distracting, but when I'm alone at night, I find myself touching the sore spots, tracing the small mounds. It feels real, like proof that something is happening. November 5th. I can't stop looking at women, not in a sexual way. I'm studying them, the way they walk, the way they hold their hands, the cadence of their laughter. I'm fascinated by their clothes, the different textures, the colors, the way a scarf can change an entire outfit. It feels like I'm learning a new language that I somehow, deep down, already knew. The world was no longer beige. It was a kaleidoscope of sensation and emotion, and I was spinning in the middle of it. The straight lines of my engineering mind were being replaced by soft, unpredictable curves. The tipping point came on a rainy afternoon. My older sister, Rebecca, had moved out of state a year ago and had left several boxes of her old things in the storage cage in my apartment building's basement. She'd called me earlier in the day, asking if I could look for an old photo album she thought she'd packed away. The basement was damp and smelled of concrete and mildew. I found her boxes tucked away in a corner, labeled Becca's stuff in her familiar, loopy handwriting. I sliced open the packing tape on the first box. It was full of old yearbooks and college textbooks. The second box held kitchen supplies she no longer needed. The third box, however, was different. As I lifted the cardboard flaps, a faint scent of old perfume and cedar rose to meet me. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were clothes, a cascade of forgotten fabrics and memories. There was a soft, grey cashmere sweater, a pair of worn-in jeans, and underneath it all, a collection of dresses. My hand hovered over them, hesitant. This felt like an invasion of privacy, even if she had abandoned these things years ago. My fingers, almost of their own accord, reached out and touched a swatch of deep burgundy fabric. It was a heavy, smooth material, cool to the touch. I lifted it out. It was a simple, elegant wrap dress, the kind that ties at the waist. I held it up against my body. It was far too short for me. Of course, but the idea of it. The thought of that smooth fabric sliding against my new, sensitive skin. It sent a shiver through me. My heart started to pound. This was wrong. This was crazy. I was a man. Lionel. An engineer. What was I doing holding my sister's old dress in a dusty basement? I should just find the photo album and leave. But I couldn't. My hand trembled as I folded the dress and placed it carefully on top of the box. Underneath it, I found a black satin nightgown with delicate lace trim at the neckline. The material felt like liquid silk in my hands. It was so light, so unabashedly feminine. I imagined the sensation of it, the weightless whisper against my skin. A war was raging inside me. The person I had always been was screaming in protest, calling this perverse and shameful. But the new person, the one who was just beginning to wake up, was whispering something else. Just once, this new voice said, "No one will ever know, just to see what it feels like." My breath hitched. I looked around the empty, silent basement. I was completely alone. I quickly scanned the other boxes, found the photo album Rebecca was looking for, and tucked it under my arm. Then, with a surge of adrenaline that made my head spin, I took the burgundy dress and the satin nightgown, folded them quickly, and slid them under my jacket. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely close the box. Walking back up the stairs to my apartment, my heart hammered against my ribs. I felt like a thief, a spy, a deviant. But underneath the fear, a different feeling was sparking to life, a wild, terrifying, and utterly thrilling sense of anticipation. I had crossed a line, and I had a feeling I was never going back. I locked the door to my apartment, leaning against it for a moment as my heart galloped in my chest. The stolen clothes were still hidden under my jacket, their softness a secret heat against my torso. The silence of my beige apartment felt different now, charged with possibility. This was my sanctuary, my laboratory. No one could see me here. I laid the two garments out on my bed like sacred artifacts, the burgundy dress and the black satin nightgown. They looked so foreign against my plain grey comforter. Alongside them, I placed a tube of old half-used lipstick I'd found at the bottom of the box, a deep, wine red color. Rebecca had probably worn it to some college party a decade ago. My hands were trembling. I stripped off my jeans and t-shirt, my usual weekend uniform, and stood in my boxer briefs, feeling clumsy and exposed. My new body looked back at me from the full-length mirror on the closet door, the softer skin, the tender swell of my chest, It was a body in transition, a canvas waiting for color. Which one first? The nightgown seemed less intimidating. I picked it up. The satin felt impossibly smooth, cool and slippery against my fingertips. I stepped into it, pulling the thin straps over my shoulders. The sensation was electric. The fabric cascaded down my body, a weightless caress against my skin. It didn't hang awkwardly as I had feared. It draped, flowing over my shoulders and chest, skimming past my waist and hips. The lace at the neckline was a delicate tickle against my collarbones. I had never felt anything like it. Cotton, wool, denim all my life. My clothes had been functional. Protective armor. This was different. This wasn't armor. It was a second skin. It moved when I moved. A soft whisper of sound accompanying every shift of my weight. I ran my hands down my sides, over my stomach, feeling the cool silk under my palms. It felt right, in a way that was deeply unsettling and profoundly peaceful all at once. I turned to the mirror. The man looking back at me was gone. In his place was a stranger, a tall, slender figure in a black slip. The harsh angles of my frame were softened by the flowing garment. My shoulders looked less broad, my waist more defined, my eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and wonder, seemed to be the only familiar thing in the reflection. For a long time, I just stood there, moving slightly, watching the play of light on the satin. A small tentative smile touched my lips. Then, my gaze fell on the lipstick, with a surge of courage. I uncapped it. The old wax had a faint, powdery scent. My hand was unsteady as I brought it to my mouth. I had no idea what I was doing. I pressed the dark red color to my lower lip, then my upper, smacking them together clumsily. It was messy, uneven. I looked back at the mirror. The slash of color was startling, transformative. It made my lips look fuller, my skin paler. It turned the tentative figure in the mirror into someone with intention. And then I knew her name. It came to me not as a thought, but as a feeling, a sense of arrival. "Hello. Amara," I whispered. The name felt strange and wonderful on my newly colored lips. Amara. She looked back at me from the mirror, her expression a cocktail of apprehension and dawning joy. She was shy, but she was here. She was real. The guilt I had anticipated, the shame, it never came. In its place was a quiet, humming euphoria. This wasn't a joke. It wasn't a costume. It felt more honest than the drab clothes I had worn my entire life. Every small feminine gesture felt instinctive. The way I brushed a stray strand of hair from my face, the slight tilt of my head as I assessed my reflection, it was all so natural. Amara wasn't a character I was playing. She was a part of me I was finally meeting. Driven by a new wave of confidence, I took off the nightgown and reached for the burgundy dress. This was more complex. It was a wrap dress, with long ties and a plunging neckline. It took me a few fumbling attempts to figure out how to put it on, my fingers clumsy with the unfamiliar mechanics of it. I finally managed to thread the tie through the small hole in the side seam and wrapped it around my waist, pulling it snug. The heavy fabric settled around me, the V-neck revealing my smooth collarbones and the slight swell of my chest. The hem fell just above my knees, exposing my long, pale legs. I tied the sash into a bow at my side. The dress hugged my torso, creating the illusion of a waist, and the skirt flared out, ready to swirl with movement. I felt beautiful. There was no other word for it, For the first time in my life, I looked at my reflection and felt a genuine sense of aesthetic pleasure. Not masculine handsomeness, but a delicate, graceful beauty I never knew I could possess. Amara smiled back at me, a real, radiant smile this time. For the next hour, I was lost in her world. I found a pair of Rebecca's old heels in the box black pumps with a modest 2-inch heel. I slipped them on, my feet protesting the unfamiliar angle. I wobbled, clutching the wall for support, but slowly. I learned to balance. I took tentative steps across my living room, the click of the heels on the hardwood floor a thrilling, percussive rhythm. I practiced walking, turning, sitting. Each movement was a discovery. I put on music, a soft instrumental playlist, and I danced. I twirled in the center of the room, my arms outstretched, feeling the weight of the dress's skirt swing around my legs. The fabric was a wave of burgundy, a joyful, spinning blur. I was no longer Lionel, the quiet engineer. I was Amara, and she was alive, vibrant, and free. I took out my phone and, after a moment's hesitation, opened the camera. I took a selfie. Amara looked back at me from the screen, her eyes bright under the warm, yellow light of my lamp. Her red lips curved into a happy, slightly nervous smile. I took another, and another. I was documenting her birth. The spell was broken by a sudden, sharp rap on my apartment door. My blood ran cold. My heart leaped into my throat. The music was still playing softly. The click of the heels had been loud. "Lionel, are you in there?" "Rebecca." It was my sister's voice, clear as a bell through the door. Panic, pure and absolute, seized me. She must have forgotten something else, or maybe she was just in the neighborhood. My mind raced. The clothes, the lipstick, the shoes. 1 second I called out, my voice coming out as a strangled squeak. I cleared my throat and tried again, forcing it lower. "Yeah, just a minute. Becca." I flew into motion, a whirlwind of panicked adrenaline. I kicked off the heels, sending one skittering under the sofa. I tore at the knot of the dress, my fingers fumbling. It wouldn't come undone. I yanked at it, ripping a small stitch in the seam with a sickening sound. Finally, it came loose. I threw the dress into my bedroom and slammed the door. The lipstick I scrubbed at my mouth with the back of my hand, smearing the red pigment across my cheek. "Lionel, is everything okay?" she called again, a note of concern in her voice. "Yeah, fine, just out of the shower," I yelled, my voice still unnaturally high. I sprinted to the bathroom and frantically washed my face with soap and water, scrubbing until my skin was raw. I looked in the mirror. A faint pink stain remained around my lips, and a smear of red was still on my cheek. I scrubbed harder. I pulled on the jeans and t-shirt I'd discarded earlier. They felt coarse and alien against my skin now. I did a frantic scan of the room. The nightgown was on the floor by my bed. I kicked it under the bed frame. One shoe was still missing. I spotted it under the couch, grabbed it, and tossed it into the bedroom with the dress before shutting the door firmly. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I ran my hands through my hair and opened the front door. Rebecca stood there, holding a bag of groceries. "Hey, I was on my way home and thought I'd drop off some pasta. You never have real food in the house," she said, smiling. Then her smile faded. "Whoa, are you okay? Your face is all red, and are you wearing makeup?" My stomach plummeted. I touched my cheek. It was probably still flushed from my frantic scrubbing. "No, of course not," I said, forcing a laugh. "Just splashed some really hot water on my face. You startled me." She eyed me suspiciously for a second, but seemed to accept the explanation. She bustled past me into the kitchen, and I closed the door, my entire body trembling. The adrenaline from the panic was still coursing through me, but underneath it was something else, a secret, dangerous thrill. I had almost been caught. I had lived as Amara for a precious hour, and the world had almost come crashing in. But it hadn't. My secret was safe. And as Rebecca chattered on about her week, I felt a strange sense of dual existence. I was Lionel, her brother, standing in a kitchen that smelled of garlic and tomatoes, but behind a closed door, Amara was waiting. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would be seeing her again very soon. The risk only made it more real. The close call with Rebecca didn't scare me away. If anything, it solidified the new reality I was building for myself. Life became a study in contrasts, a sharp dividing line drawn between day and night, between Lionel and Amara. By day, I was Lionel. I went to the office, sat in my beige cubicle, and spoke in spreadsheets and blueprints. I was quiet, efficient, and unremarkable. But I felt like an actor playing a role I no longer understood. The stiff collar of my dress shirt felt like a noose. The heavy work boots on my feet felt like blocks of cement, anchoring me to a life that was no longer mine. I would catch my reflection in the dark screen of my computer monitor and feel a jolt of dissociation. That somber, straight-lined man wasn't me. Not anymore. But when I came home, when I locked the door behind me, I would shed Lionel like a heavy coat. The first thing I did was shower, washing away the grime and pretense of the day. And then, the ritual would begin. I had purchased a few things of my own. Small acts of rebellion hidden in the back of my closet. A simple A-line skirt from a thrift store. A soft jersey knit top. A cheap makeup kit from the drugstore. The transformation became my anchor. The careful application of foundation. The subtle sweep of mascara that made my eyes look bigger. The slick glide of a nude lipstick. Then, the clothes. The sensation of a soft skirt swirling around my legs. The feeling of a blouse draping over my tender chest. When I looked in the mirror, Amara would look back, and I could finally breathe. As Amara, I felt present. I read books. I listened to music. I journaled. I was getting to know myself for the first time. The journal was filled with her thoughts, her feelings. November 20th. I put on a soft pink sweater today. The color made me feel so calm and gentle. I realized I've spent my whole life wearing gray, blue, and black, as if I were afraid of color. I'm not afraid anymore. December 2nd. I tried cooking a real meal tonight. A pasta dish with a homemade sauce. Lionel always ordered takeout, but Amara wanted to create something. It was delicious. It felt good to nourish my body in this way. The two lives couldn't stay separate forever. The border between them began to blur. I started wearing clear nail polish to work, a tiny secret act of defiance. I let my hair grow out, just a little longer than usual, brushing it back from my face. Sarah from the next cubicle commented on it. "Your hair is getting long." "Lionel, it suits you. Look softer." I nearly glowed with a secret pride. The desire to take Amara out of the apartment became an overwhelming ache. She was tired of being confined to those four walls. She wanted to feel the night air on her skin. One Friday evening, I spent 2 hours getting ready. I chose a simple black dress, a pair of opaque tights, and flat shoes. I wasn't brave enough for heels in public yet. I had bought a wig online, a simple, shoulder-length brunette bob. It felt strange and artificial at first, but when I looked in the mirror, it completed the picture. Amara was no longer just me in a dress. She was a plausible woman. My heart was a drum solo against my ribs. This was insane, but I had to do it. I grabbed my car keys, my hand shaking, and slipped out of my apartment. walking quickly and keeping my head down until I reached the parking garage. I slid into the driver's seat of my car, the familiar space feeling, completely new. I adjusted the rearview mirror and saw a nervous woman with dark hair and wide eyes staring back at me. I took a deep breath and started the engine. Driving as Amara was a revelation. I didn't have a destination. I just drove through the city streets. The anonymous darkness of the car my shield. I cracked the window, and the cool night air rushed in, tossing the synthetic strands of the wig across my face. I could feel the light fabric of the dress shifting against my legs with the motion of the car. The city lights streaked past, a blur of neon and gold. And they weren't just lights. They were a glittering backdrop for my grand escape. I felt free, utterly, terrifyingly free. This wasn't just about clothes or makeup anymore. This was about who I was. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I could never go back. I couldn't stuff Amara back into a box in the basement. She was me. Living two lives was tearing me apart. The joy I felt as Amara only made the hollowness of being Lionel more acute. The constant fear of discovery, the exhausting effort of switching between two identities, it wasn't sustainable. The next morning, with a resolve I didn't know I possessed, I picked up the phone and made an appointment with Dr. Martinez. When I walked into his office a few days later, I was Lionel. I wore my usual drab work clothes. But inside, my spirit was dressed in burgundy and satin. "Doctor," Martinez smiled warmly. "Lionel, good to see you. How have you been feeling? Is the HRT helping with the fatigue?" I sat down, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. My throat was dry. I took a breath. "Doctor," I began, my voice quiet but steady. "We need to talk about the prescription. The estradiol." His smile faltered slightly. "Is there a problem? Any adverse side effects?" This was it, the point of no return. "The side effects have been significant," I said, choosing my words carefully. "My skin is softer, my body fat is redistributing, and I'm developing breast tissue. But that's not what I came to talk about." I looked him directly in the eye. "Doctor, I don't think I'm the man you met a few months ago." He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. He steepled his fingers, watching me, waiting. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I told him everything. I told him about the confusion, the reckless decision to take the pill anyway. I told him about the subtle emotional shifts, the cascade of feelings. I told him about finding Rebecca's clothes, about the reflection in the mirror, about the birth of Amara. I told him about the double life, the secret joy, and the profound sense of rightness I felt when I was her. I talked for a long time, the words tumbling out of me, a confession and a declaration all at once. When I finished, I was breathless, my heart pounding. I had laid my entire soul bare on the floor of his office. I braced myself for his reaction: confusion, judgment, maybe even a call to a psychiatrist. Dr. Martinez was quiet for a long time. He looked down at his desk, then back up at me. His tired eyes were filled with a startling clarity and a deep, unexpected compassion. "Lionel," he began. And then he stopped himself. He took a deep breath. "A few weeks ago, my office manager discovered a clerical error. Your prescription was mixed up with that of another patient, a transgender woman who has been my patient for years. The estradiol was meant for her. The air went out of my lungs. So it was a mistake, a simple, stupid filing error. I was going to call you immediately." He continued, his voice soft. "It was a serious error, a breach of my duty of care. But something stopped me. I decided to wait for your next follow-up, to see what, if anything, you would say." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. What you've described, this is not a side effect of a medication. Lionel, a pill cannot create a person who wasn't already there. All it did, perhaps, was open a door that was already unlocked. What you did was find the courage to walk through it. Tears pricked my eyes. To be seen, to be understood so completely, it was overwhelming. There are two ways to look at this. Dr. Martinez said, "We can see it as a medical mistake, for which I am profoundly sorry." Or, he gave a small, sad smile. "We can see it as a mistake of fate, a clumsy, accidental push in the direction you were already meant to go." He slid a notepad across the desk. "I believe your treatment should continue, but it should be deliberate. It should be done with the right support system, and with you in control, with her in control." He wrote down a name and a phone number. "This is Dr. Aris Thorne. He's a gender therapist. He's the best. I think you should talk to him." He looked at me, his expression serious. "This path isn't easy, but it seems to me that you've already been on the harder path your entire life. Perhaps it's time to try a different one." I looked down at the name on the paper. Dr. Aris Thorne, gender specialist. It was real. This was happening. This wasn't a secret game anymore. "Thank you," I whispered, the words thick with unshed tears. "Don't thank me," he said gently. "You're the one who did the work. Now, tell me, what is her name?" I looked up, and for the first time, I said it out loud to another human being. A real smile, Amara's smile, spread across my face. "Her name is Amara." Leaving Dr. Martinez's office was like stepping into a different world. The sky seemed brighter, the air crisper. A mistake had been made, yes, but it had led me to the truth. I was no longer a man secretly playing dress-up. I was Amara, a woman at the very beginning of her journey. The referral to a gender therapist was a key, a map, a promise that I wasn't alone in this. My first few sessions with Dr. Thorne, were a revelation. He was a calm, thoughtful man who created a space where I could unpack the lifetime of confusion and repression I had carried. We talked about my childhood, my feelings of otherness, the persistent sense of being an actor in my own life, and for the first time, I spoke about Amara not as a secret identity, but as my true self. He gave me the language to understand what was happening. Gender identity, dysphoria, transition. These weren't abstract concepts anymore. They were the building blocks of my reality. With his guidance, I made a plan. My medical transition would continue, this time officially and under proper supervision, but the social transition that was the next great mountain to climb, and the first person I had to tell was Rebecca. The thought terrified me. She was my only family. Her approval, or at least her acceptance, felt essential. I invited her over for dinner one Saturday, my hands sweating as I cooked the same pasta dish Amara had made weeks before. She arrived, cheerful and oblivious, chattering about her work. We ate, we made small talk, but I could barely swallow my food. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. "Becca, there's something I need to tell you," I said, my voice trembling slightly. She put her fork down, her expression immediately turning serious. "Okay, you sound like you're about to confess to a murder. What's up?" My carefully rehearsed speech evaporated. The words just came tumbling out, raw and honest. I told her about the prescription mistake, about the changes, about the feelings I'd suppressed my whole life. I told her about the dresses, the wig, the secret drives at night. And finally, I told her the name. "The person you've known as your brother, he was never really here," I said, tears streaming down my face. The real me. Her name is Amara. Rebecca was silent. Her face was a mask of shock, her eyes wide. She just stared at me. And in that silence, my worst fears began to bloom. I had lost her. I had destroyed the one family connection I had left. So, that day, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper, when I came by and your face was all red, you were... I nodded, unable to speak, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. I was wearing your old burgundy dress. She was quiet for another long moment. Then she took a deep breath. Can I see her? The question caught me off guard, sir. Amara, she said, you have a picture. Right, you told me you took pictures. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through the gallery, past the photos of bridges and landscapes. To the hidden folder, I found the very first selfie I had ever taken as Amara, the one with the messy lipstick. Nervous smile, and eyes shining with a fragile, newfound light. I slid the phone across the table. Rebecca picked it up. She stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. I watched her face, searching for any sign of disgust or rejection. Her expression softened. A strange, sad smile touched her lips. Wow, she breathed. She looked up from the phone, her eyes meeting mine. They were glistening with tears. You look happy. I mean, really, truly happy. I haven't seen you look like that since we were kids. A sob escaped my chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. It's going to take me a minute to get my head around this. Okay, she said, her voice thick with emotion. The pronoun stuff. The name? I'll probably mess up. But if this is who you are, then this is who you are. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was firm, warm. It's nice to finally meet you. Amara. That moment changed everything. With Rebecca's support, my confidence soared. She became my staunchest ally. A week later, she called me. Clear your schedule for Saturday, she announced. We're going shopping. Amara needs her own wardrobe. No more of my dusty old cast-offs. That first shopping trip was both terrifying and magical. Walking into the women's section of a department store felt like crossing into another country. The sheer volume of colors, textures, and styles was overwhelming. Rebecca was a gentle guide. She showed me how to find my sizes, which were awkward and in between. She explained the difference between cuts of jeans, the types of fabrics that draped well, and the essential items every woman needed. In the dressing room, I tried on a simple, forest green wrap dress she had picked out. It was similar in style to her old one. But this one was new. This one was mine. As I tied the sash at my waist and looked in the mirror, I felt a shiver of profound emotion. This wasn't borrowed. This wasn't a secret. This was me, Amara. Buying her first dress, I stepped out to show Rebecca. She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Oh, Amara, she whispered, it's perfect. I bought the dress and a pair of dark-wash skinny jeans, several soft blouses, a cozy cardigan, and my first real set of lingerie, not something from a box in the basement, but a pretty comfortable bra and matching panties I picked out for myself. Walking out of the store with those shopping bags in my hand, I felt a sense of legitimacy I had never known. I wasn't pretending. I was just being. The next step was work. It was the most daunting prospect of all. I worked in a male-dominated field, an old-school environment of pragmatism and gruff professionalism. With the help of Dr. Thorne and an HR representative, I drafted an email that was sent out to my department. It was simple, direct, and professional. It explained that I was transgender, that I would be living and working as my authentic self, and that my name was Amara, and my pronouns were she/her. The first day I walked into the office as Amara was the longest day of my life. I had spent hours choosing my outfit, a pair of tailored black trousers, a simple cream-colored silk blouse, and low-heeled boots. My makeup was subtle, my hair styled neatly. I held my head high, but my heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest. The reactions were mixed. Some people stared, then quickly looked away. Some whispered as I passed. A few old-timers gave me looks that ranged from confusion to outright hostility, but there were pockets of warmth. My boss, a stern man I barely spoke to, called me into his office, closed the door, and simply said, "Welcome, Amara. Let me know if anyone gives you any trouble." And then there was Sarah from the next cubicle. She came over to my desk with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me, her smile genuine and kind. "I love that blouse, Amara," she said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "That color is great on you." In that moment of simple human decency, I almost started crying. Her acceptance was a lifeline. It wasn't a perfect transition. There were awkward questions, people who refused to use my name, and a constant, low-level anxiety. But with every day that I walked into that office as myself, it got easier. I learned to ignore the stares. I learned to gently correct people on my pronouns. I learned to inhabit my own space, to take up my place in the world not as a man in hiding, but as a woman who refused to be invisible. My life took on a new rhythm. My daily routine was no longer a chore, but a celebration. Waking up, choosing an outfit that made me feel confident, the quiet meditation of applying my makeup, styling my growing hair. These small acts were affirmations of my identity. I was learning to love the body I was in, to appreciate the new softness, the gentle curves that were emerging. I was finally, after 28 years, coming home to myself. The shadows were gone, and I was stepping into the light. 5 years. It sounds like a long time, but it passed in a beautiful, transformative blur. The world didn't stop turning, but my world had been entirely remade. I sit here now, in the soft glow of a table lamp, in a home that is truly mine. It's not the beige, sterile apartment of my past. This place is filled with color, with art, with books, with life. The woman who lives here is not the ghost who haunted Lionel's existence. She is vibrant and very, very real. My name is Amara, and I am 33 years old. I no longer work as an engineer, designing roadways of concrete and steel. The empathy and understanding I discovered within myself led me down a different path. After going back to school, I became a consultant for companies looking to create more inclusive and supportive workplaces. I help them build bridges of understanding between people, a far more satisfying challenge than building bridges of concrete. The woman sleeping peacefully in the next room is named Alex. She's a graphic designer with a laugh that can fill a whole house, and a quiet strength that has been my anchor for the past 3 years. She met Amara, not Lionel. She fell in love with my story, with my strength, not with a shadow of who I was supposed to be. She traces the faint scars on my chest from my top surgery with a tenderness that still makes my breath catch. She loves me for exactly who I am. Our life together is one of quiet joy and mutual respect, a partnership I never even knew how to dream of. Tonight is my 33rd birthday. Alex took me out to a beautiful dinner at a restaurant overlooking the city lights. Now, home and content. I find myself standing before the full-length mirror in our bedroom. The same mirror that once showed me a confused stranger in a satin nightgown. The woman who looks back at me now is confident and serene. Her brunette hair falls in soft waves past her shoulders. Her eyes, once filled with fear and bewilderment, now hold a calm, steady light. Her face is soft, her features settled into a peaceful femininity that feels as natural as breathing. There are fine lines of laughter around her eyes. She is wearing a simple, elegant red dress. It's not my sister's dress, nor is it the green one that was my first purchase. This one is new, a birthday gift from Alex. It's made of a heavy, flowing silk that drapes beautifully. The color are rich, deep crimson, but it is red, and the color is intentional. It's a nod, a symbol. It reminds me of that first spark of awareness. That moment I saw Jessica in her red satin dress at the office and felt that inexplicable tug, that first whisper from the woman who was waiting inside me. The journey from that moment to this one feels both impossibly long and startlingly fast. I think back to Lionel, that sad, lonely man adrift in a sea of grey. I don't hate him. I feel a deep, abiding compassion for him. He was doing the best he could with the tools he had. He carried me safely through the darkness until I was ready for the light. He was the vessel that held the seed of Amara until a fateful mistake gave it the right conditions to finally grow. Dr. Martinez called it a mistake of fate. I've come to think of it as a perfect error, a fortunate fall. If that clerical mix-up hadn't happened, where would I be now? Still in that beige apartment, still feeling that soul-deep fatigue, that sense of being an imposter in my own life. Maybe I would have found my way here eventually, on a different path. But I believe that little pink pill was the catalyst, the key that unlocked the cage I didn't even know I was in. It didn't create Amara, but it gave her permission to be born. I run my hands down the smooth silk of the dress, the sensation familiar and comforting now. The clothes are no longer a costume. They are just my clothes, an expression of the woman I am. The physical changes, once so startling and new, are now just my body, the soft curve of my hip, the gentle slope of my breasts, the texture of my skin. It is all simply me, the constant, gnawing feeling of wrongness, the dysphoria that was the background noise of my entire life, is gone. In its place is a profound, quiet peace. Alex stirs in her sleep and murmurs my name. A soft smile touches my lips. I am loved. I am seen. I am whole. I look at my reflection one last time. I see the engineer who understood structure, the woman who learned to embrace fluidity. I see the frightened soul who hid in the shadows, and the brave woman who learned to dance in the light. There is no trace of fear left in her eyes. There is only gratitude, peace, and the radiant, unshakable pride of a woman who finally came home to herself. Happy birthday, Amara, I whisper to the woman in the mirror. And she smiles back.